All right, here we go. Brand new Flyers Daily for the 9th of March, 2024. Flyers Daily presented by Ticketmaster. Make more memories live. The 2024 NHL Trade Deadline is in the books. Ended yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Very active day around the NHL. Saw some teams really do a lot to try and improve themselves. Will it? That's the question that'll be answered in time. Sometimes you make the deals and they look great on paper for teams trying to add a couple of pieces to push for a Stanley Cup. But when you add in those pieces after 60, 61, 62, 63 games, and on the 8th of March, is there enough time for those players to assimilate into that locker room, into the scheme on the ice? Sometimes we've seen that that's not the case, but very busy day and a busy week around the NHL for the NHL Trade Deadline. Flyers were involved, obviously, yesterday and this week with the Sean Walker trade for the first-round pick and Ryan Johansson, who Danny Briere talked to some teams about yesterday, tried to move, would retain on the $4 million owed to Ryan Johansson, but ultimately there was no deal to be made, and Ryan Johansson has now been assigned to the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. We'll see what his future holds within the Flyers organization. And obviously, they extended Nick Seeler, and then yesterday, they made a couple of deals as well. Did not go goalie. They are going to stick with Sam Ersson as their starter. That much is obvious. And likely Felix Sandstrom as the Flyers' backup. Played well in his last game and opted not to go and grab a veteran goaltender. Did not claim Antti Ranta from waivers. I know a lot of people really wanted the Flyers to do that. And Ranta is a guy that's had a good career, but has not been good this year. And I think sometimes we get caught up in what the name of the player and what the player was, not what the player is. There's a reputation sometimes that is not the reality at the current time. I mean, he had 880 save percentage this season in Carolina, obviously a very good team, and just did not perform very well at all. Has cleared waivers now multiple times this season from the Carolina Hurricanes organization. So they don't go goalie. So what did they do? Well, they traded for Erik Johnson, a former number 1 overall pick back in the 2006 NHL entry draft. So he's been around a while. He's played 970 NHL games, 91 goals, 249 assists, 340 points over that period of time. In his career, he's averaged over 20 minutes a night, 20.56. Never been a high-powered offensive guy. Did have a season where he had, I think his high in goals is 12 for his career. But is a defensive defenseman, and he's a big body. He is a 6'4", 225-pounder, a right shot to boot. And with some of the attrition the Flyers have suffered on the back end, with obviously the trading of Sean Walker, Jamie Drysdale, and Rasmus Ristolainen, both right shot guys hurt. The Flyers add a right shot D. We'll see what it means. Does it mean he plays every game? Is he going to come into the lineup and Adam Ginning go out of the lineup? Or Ronnie Attard, a fellow right shot D? We'll see how that plays out. But again, a 4th-round pick is traded for Erik Johnson, and the Flyers grab some defensive depth. Now, I know this one, it irked a lot of fans that I saw on social media. Some celebrated it, not like it was some kind of crazy move, and this is the move that puts you over the top. But some panned it because the Flyers gave up a 4th-round pick. And look, when I look at 4th, 5th, 6th-round picks, 7th-round picks, they're not that valuable because those players in the 4th round, as the math plays out, generally speaking, the chance of a 4th-round pick playing 200 games in the NHL is very low. It's about 2%. So you're not giving up a lot. I've always said it. A lot of people overvalue draft picks. They love the unknown. But the numbers bear out that a 4th-round pick is likely not going to be a game changer. Now, there have been 4th-round picks. There's been 7th-round picks that have been Hall of Famers, everything. So, and I understand the notion of when you're rebuilding, there's no such thing as too much assets. But I think that 4th-round pick, if it helps them, and that remains to be seen, if it helps them get to the playoffs, it's well worth it because you're going to get these young guys on the Flyers, like I've talked about, playoff experience, which I think is absolutely huge for their development, to understand what it takes in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and to really kind of move their expectations of the league and preparation for the league to a whole nother level. I'm talking about guys like Noah Cates. I'm talking about guys like Tyson Forster. They haven't played in NHL postseason hockey. Owen Tippett. You look at these guys and you go, they could, a round of the playoffs, or you never know what's going to happen, but a round of the playoffs would be great for them. Bobby Brink, if he can get in there. Cam York. And not the least of which is Sam Ersson, to get a taste of the Stanley Cup playoffs, to get your goaltender a look and see what that's all about, because it is a different game in the playoffs. So they make the deal. They get Erik Johnson. He is now a member of the Philadelphia Flyers. He's in the final year of his deal as well. They also made a trade. They traded with Nashville and got Danny Briere, and they trade Wade Allison, who spent this entire season with the Lehigh Valley Phantoms. Of course, we know Wade Allison played a lot of games for the Flyers last year. Matter of fact, 60. He was a 52nd overall pick in the second round in the 2016 draft. This year with the Phantoms, in 46 games played, not really having a good year. 10 goals, 7 assists, 17 points. And in 60 games last year with the Flyers, 9 goals, 6 assists, and 15 points. And, Wade Allison's not an old man by any stretch. He's 26 years of age. Won't be 27 until next October. But I do think some of the injuries that he dealt with through his college career and as a pro wore down his body a little bit. And he's a guy that had a lot of promise. But the one thing, I remember talking to him at exit day last year at the end of the season, and the one thing that I mentioned to him, I said, the one thing I wanted to see more of from you this year was the shot. I want to see, he's got a great shot and a great release. We just didn't see it enough. He just wasn't getting to the places where he could showcase his greatest asset, his shot. Was a good straight line forechecker and a guy that was tough and tenacious, good size to him, 6'2", 205 pounds, but played hard and played heavier than he was. But ultimately, he fell out of favor here, couldn't work his way back up when guys like Tyson Forster and Bobby Brink kind of opened some eyes at training camp and looked like they were ready. And Wade Allison kind of got moved to the back burner and got moved out today or yesterday at the trade deadline. So the Flyers get Danny Briere. We're going to hear from Danny Briere in just a minute. He spoke with the media on Friday as well, and we'll give you that from the Flyers general manager in just a moment. Now, Briere is a former 12th overall pick. Again, a high pedigree guy, taken 12th overall in the first round of the 2015 NHL draft. He is 26 years of age as well. 6'3", 205-pounder, pretty big guy. Solid. And he actually, early in his career, had a really good year in 1920 in 64 games. Remember, that's the pandemic-shortened season. He had 20 goals in that season. 9 assists, but 20 goals in 64 games. Had a really good playoff, had 9 goals and 8 assists and 17 points in 27 games for the Dallas Stars, and looked like he was on his way to kind of fulfilling the expectation of a 12th overall pick. But coming back from the pandemic, in 55 games, he had 12 goals, 18 assists, and 30 points. Still pretty solid season. But then in 73 games, only 11 goals and 31 points. And then in the 22-23 season, he played for multiple teams. 23 games with Montreal, only 5 goals. 43 games with the Stars, only 2 goals. Then he gets moved, played in the AHL a bit for the Milwaukee Admirals. Had a nice stint there this season. He had 12 goals, 18 assists, and 30 points in 27 games. And with Nashville this year, just a goal and an assist. So a bit of a reclamation project here. This will be one to see if John Tortorella can unlock the player and get him, his trajectory and his career going back in the right direction to maybe fulfill a little bit more of that promise that he initially showed. But it's a depth forward add. Again, these aren't earth-shattering moves that the Flyers made to add to this roster. They are in a rebuild. They didn't go out and give up a whole heck of a lot. They literally gave up a 4th-round pick. Are they better now than they were a week ago before Sean Walker was traded and everything that's happened in total? That remains to be seen. That's a question mark. I don't know. I don't think defensively they are, especially with Nick Seeler out right now and Drysdale still being out and Ristolainen. They're thin on the blue line. And Erik Johnson doesn't just come in and fix that. He's not Chris Pronger, or he's not one of those guys that's going to come in and solve all your defensive problems. But it is a depth add with very little risk and some potential decent gain. So Danny Briere, again, wasn't able to get Ryan Johansson shipped to a different situation, and the Philadelphia Flyers trade deadline was impactful, especially because the Flyers drove the price they drove on Sean Walker and got a first-round pick. Seeing some of the deals that happened over the league over the last week, I mean, when Tanev gets moved, I'm going, man, there's no first-round value out there for a right-shot D. And as it turned out, Danny Briere was able to do that. And he did that because he was able to weaponize his cap space as well, which is a big thing. We'll see how they do that next in the offseason. Some players, other people talked about, Scott Laughton, obviously not moved. And I didn't think that was a possibility here at the deadline unless a team was going to grossly overpay for Scott Laughton. It's a deal that would be more likely for me with term after this year that would happen in the offseason. Plus, I think that would be a blow to the room that has put themselves in this position to battle for a playoff spot. I think that would be a big blow. Sean Walker is, but to a degree, but to a much higher degree, Scott Laughton would have been for sure. So he remains a Philadelphia Flyer, and for that we're happy. So we'll see where it goes from here. Flyers are back in action tonight. They got Tampa tonight. They've split with Tampa so far this season. They had a 6-3 loss against Tampa at Wells Fargo Center and a 6-2 win against Tampa. The situation right now in the standings, it's still tight. Flyers got that win in Florida. Very important 2 points. They're at 74 points now on the season. Islanders sitting just 4 back with 2 games in hand. Interesting number between the Flyers and the Islanders. Flyers are +5 in goal differential. Islanders are -14, but they have won 5 straight, and they do have a new coach in Patrick Waugh, who seems to have them moving in the right direction. So Flyers will take on Tampa tonight. Tampa through 64 games, 33-25-6, 72 points. Flyers through 64, 33-23, and 8, 74 points, sitting in the 3rd spot in the Metropolitan Division. All right, without further ado, let's get it to the general manager. He met with the media yesterday to talk all things NHL Trade Deadline. So here's Danny Briere.
You're acquiring Erik Johnson. Obviously, you were, I assume, looking for some depth on D. Is it also somewhat of a reward to the group for putting themselves in the position that they have?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We removed a pretty big piece in Sean Walker, and the guys have worked extremely hard to get us to the point that they've gotten us this year. I'm not expecting and asking Erik Johnson to replace Sean Walker. What we're looking for from Erik is to bring his experience, the fact that he's played for a long time, the fact that he's played a lot of playoff games, the fact that he's won a Stanley Cup. Hopefully he can, share a little bit of that with our group, with our young group, especially on defense right now with all the injuries too that we have. It's a pretty young group, so we're hoping that he can, share a little bit of his experience with our team. That's kind of the reason behind the whole time, going into the season. That was part of, bringing a guy like Mark Stahl, who's done a tremendous job with our young guys, and then now in this position now with the injuries, we're even younger. Mark Stahl has been amazing this season for us. Like all this experience that he was able to share, I think he's made guys like Zamula and Cam York even better. So maybe a little bit more of that with Erik Johnson.
With regards to Erik Johnson, he's obviously had a really impressive career. He's definitely on the older side now. I think there's a perception that his game has dipped the last couple of years. Why do you think he can help you guys over this last little bit to try to make this playoff push?
Well, it's mostly his experience, what he can share with our group. maybe bring a little bit of stability, back there, and being comfortable in the moment. When you have guys that have played as many playoff games as he has, it's an asset, and hopefully he can help a group that is on the younger side. That's just a reality. Our guys have played extremely well. We've been impressed with how they've played the last few games. Some really tough games, but at the end of the day, it's still a young team. So that's where a guy like Erik Johnson hopefully might be able to help.
How do you view Gurianov and how he would fit in here?
Gurianov?
Yes.
That came about. I mean, he's interesting. A big 6'3" left winger that can skate like him. The fact that he's had some success in some big games. He's had a pretty interesting playoff run a few years ago. I know it's been a little tougher for him the last couple of years, but again, it's if he catches fire again. We're a little thin on the left side, and he brings us speed and size. So who knows where that goes? And there's a little bit of fact that Wade Allison probably needed a change of scenery for his development. It's been a rough season for Wade, so we wanted to give him the chance, maybe to catch fire on his side, on his end too, and kind of kickstart his career again, because it's been tough for him.
So is Gurianov going to start on the NHL roster, or is he going to leave?
He will. He's coming here. He's going to meet us here. So as far as the roster or for the game tomorrow, that I don't know. That you'll have to ask Torts on that.
How would you characterize the afternoon? Were you fielding calls, or were you making any calls, or how did it shake out?
There was a lot of sharing with our group, looking at all possibilities. Who was out there? How could we improve our team? Obviously, we were bargain shopping too a little bit, so we had to be aware of that. At the end of the day, we had 11 picks going into the draft, and we still have 10. So just losing one pick and not on the first two rounds, so that was something that we weren't ready to do. So we're excited. I think at the end of the day, it's a good day for us.
Danny, you mentioned yesterday that you were going to try to find Ryan Johansson a new home. Obviously, that didn't happen.
Yep.
Did the offer just not materialize? And what comes next for him? Does he go to the AHL? How are you guys going to play this?
Yeah, we didn't have a lot of talks, but there's a select few teams that kind of danced around. But at the end of the day, nobody was willing to make the move. We were willing to retain on him too. Unfortunately, it just didn't pan out. So at this time, we're going to ask him to report to Lehigh Valley, and hopefully, we can get it going again. And things change fast in hockey. You never know. So hopefully for him, is he can get it going in Lehigh Valley, and we'll see where that goes. I really don't know what the next step after this will be for him.
Have you talked? Did you get a message at all to Scott Laughton leading up to the deadline that he wasn't going anywhere? Because obviously his name was out there. He talked about it openly. Did you maybe call him at some point? Was he relieved?
Yes, and I was honest with Scott from the beginning, just like I've been with you guys. My job as a general manager is to listen to what's out there, and I told him that. And Scott and I have a special relationship because we've played together. When you've played with someone, there's a bond that forms there. It's just the way it is. We've said it from the get-go. We're trying to be as honest as we can with our players, especially with Scott and that bond that we have. So I was upfront with him. I told him that I probably I wasn't shopping him, first of all. I wasn't going to trade him for fair value, because he's more than fair value to us. The intangibles that he brings in the locker room is something that has no price, and the other teams don't see that. but we do. And I told him that. I said, we're not going to trade you if it's just a fair trade. Someone would have to overstep and really knock it out of the ballpark for us to consider it. And, yes, I did listen. I had a lot of teams interested in him. As you can imagine, there's not a lot of centermen, and he's a good one. So the good thing for him, as I said, the teams around the NHL still value you. So I think that's exciting for him, but not good enough for us to let a player like that go. That is critical to the development of our locker room, and our young guys around him.
Can you talk about that a little bit more, as far as from that perspective, that you say teams from around the league don't know what you know? Maybe that way you can present it for the public as well. Like, what don't they understand? What don't people understand that you need more than fair value to move a player like that?
Well, if you look at I think some of the quotes that came out from some of the players, our coaches' quotes, that tells you a lot of what people think. And I'm aware of that. I talk to the players. I've had people come to me and say, we need him for this stretch. And obviously, it's teammates supporting teammates, which is great. But we started when we hired Torts. We started kind of changing the culture a little bit. And without Sean Couturier around the dressing room last year, Scott was probably the guy that stepped up the most and started working on that culture change. And then this year, coming into the season, again, he was one of the leader. He's still one of the leader in that department. It's the way he treats and his teammates, his coaches, the way we have a term in French that I can't seem to get. It's like he brings people together.
What's the term in French?
Rassembleur. So so he's someone that brings people together, and it would have been scary to let a guy go like that, especially in the situation that we're in, that we're trying to make the playoffs.
Danny, going into this deadline, I think you guys have obviously said that you're rebuilding, but I think a lot of people were looking at this deadline as a way to figure out exactly what that meant, what your definition of a rebuild was and how you guys were going to execute it. Is it fair to say that the avenue you guys are taking is a rebuild, but with a very strong emphasis upon the culture aspect and trying to always balance those two things?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. The culture is we felt the first thing that needed to change around here. I didn't like how our team was playing the last few years. We were a team that was easy to play against. And for me, and I've said that before, I think the first step in that change was John Tortorella. Brought an identity to our team, forced our players to play a certain way that makes it tough to face. You look at our team, we're really in-your-face type of team. We try to take time and space away from the other team, and that makes it really tough. Just talking to different players around the league and executive, everybody, that's the one thing that keeps coming up, is how hard we are to face. And it's not just when I say that, people assume right away it's just the physicality side of it, but it's more than that. It's the time and space that the players are allowed or given on the other side that makes it tough. They don't have time or a lot of time to make plays. It's always tough. So that was probably the first step. Now, I have to give our coaches and our players a lot of credit for the way they've played. I've said it many times. We didn't expect to be where we are at this stage of the season. We hope to play meaningful games, but to be inside that playoff bubble, third in our division, that's probably above what we expected. So, that's even more exciting. So that's, it's all coming together, but it doesn't change at the end of the day what we're trying to do and having an outlook towards the future, making sure that it's sustainable for years to come, and not not just 1 year.
But is it fair to say that, while you guys are certainly accumulating assets, you traded Sean Walker for a first-round pick, that your vision of this being sustainable requires the culture to be strong as well?
That was the first step for us to have success down the road, to develop players the right way. You can acquire all the assets that you want, but if you don't, and you can look at other teams, they do that, they acquire assets, but it's tough when you don't have the right culture to develop those guys. That's another reason why player development was also an important part of our, readjustment that we made this summer. That all comes together, and then who knows what's going to happen. I don't want to talk about next year, but who knows what next year, that'll be a different story. But it's not just about this year or next year. It's about 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road too, that we make sure we get better and better and become Stanley Cup contenders.
Yes, one or two more.
Do you feel like you've hit all the boxes on your checklist for the trade deadline?
I don't know. I didn't have a checklist per se. It's more about adjusting along the way, and because things change. I mean, there's all kinds of things going on all day. You're getting different calls, different players. It changes from 1 minute to the next. The one thing that we had going in today, we wanted to provide a little bit of depth and experience on defense after having lost Sean Walker. So that was the major one, without spending high-end asset. So that was done. The Gurianov is a nice little ad that we had to adjust along the way, that we were excited about.
What was it like for you going through this process for the first time as a GM?
It was interesting. Learned a lot. Probably the thing that I'm most proud of is how we all work together. In that room we had Jonesy, Dan Hilford. He stopped by. It was fun to have him around and see how everything was working. Our management, the assistant GMs were all there. The analytics guys were involved with what they were doing. Our pro scouts with what they had seen. What I'm most proud of is how we all worked together, and everybody had a say, and everybody had an opinion, and that's probably the best part about how it worked today. But for me personally, it's my first one. I don't know if it's normal or not, but I had a fun day.
You guys just in like a big suite here or something, and all sitting around.
At a little conference room. Yeah. So.
Last one. Going back real quick, you talked a little bit earlier about Wade Allison, about that he might benefit from a change of scenery. I'm curious as to why you think it got to the point where he needed a change of scenery. I know he's popular in that room. He was popular with the fans. He spent a lot of time with the team last year.
Yeah.
Why do you think it got to the point where he needed a change of scenery?
Yeah, it's a good question. I came in, we had him penciled into our roster at the beginning of the season, going into the training camp. And, I still remember my first speech to the players was, don't take anything for granted. This is not charity. You have to keep pushing the envelope. And, I think his camp was just okay. And then all of a sudden, Forster and Brink, who we didn't have penciled in, came out of nowhere, and not really out of nowhere because we had high hopes down the road for them, but showed that they were more prepared right away than we expected. And they took his spot. And I don't know, it's like he just couldn't get out of it after, couldn't recover. And those two guys, Tyson just kept playing better and better all year. We can't take him out of our lineup anymore. Bobby's case, he was excellent early on, and then started getting scratched. We didn't want him to sit around. Went back, kind of got his confidence back, and when he came back, he was really good again. Gave us a jolt early on. So for some reason, Wade wasn't able to get the traction back, and we felt at this point it was for his own development, it might be better to have a try somewhere else and snap it out. So, we like Wade. It's nothing personal, and actually we hope that it works out better for him.
Thanks, Danny.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Danny.
You don't have any sort of update on the injured defenseman, do you? Drysdale or Risto?
No, I don't. And they're back in Philly, just like Sealer, so I don't even have anything on Sealer. I know what we have here, and Eric Johnson is on his way. That's all I know.
There he is, Flyers general manager Danny Briere, meeting with the media to talk all things NHL trade deadline. And I thought Danny navigated the market extremely well. Walker, you hear about all these teams in the mix for Walker, and then all of a sudden you come to find out it's Colorado. Colorado was never mentioned, so able to operate in a way with teams that it doesn't get out there publicly and kind of put some rot on the discussions and derail them. So first trade deadline for Danny Briere. He'll have an offseason this summer where he's going to have to make a whole bunch of more key decisions, not just the draft, but roster-wise as well. All right, everybody, enjoy the hockey tonight. It's Flyers Lightning. We'll break it down tomorrow. Join us then on a brand new episode of Flyers Daily.